Is this the littlest crisis we need to finally fix things? Throughout history, catastrophe has preceded major transformations. Global health systems were strengthened after the 1918 influenza pandemic. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal emerged from the wreckage of the Great Depression. The United Nations rose from the ashes of the Second World War. We learn the hard way, again and again. Seeing what is needed is not enough. Political systems, like markets, need failure to force correction. And so for decades, those of us working for climate action, economic fairness, and institutional renewal have lived with an improbable hope that we might get lucky. We know that deep structural threats, from a heating planet to surging inequality, will eventually trigger collapse. We know that. But we've quietly hoped that a smaller rupture, a littler crisis, might come first. A crisis large enough to spur action, but small enough to avoid devastation. And so, the political turbulence caused by this new Trump era raises an interesting question. Could this be that littler crisis we've been waiting for? Other crises have long signalled the need for a new global settlement. The financial crash of 2008 exposed the fragility of deregulated global markets, but the response was technocratic, not structural. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed the limits of national resilience, but also of global solidarity. Meanwhile, the climate crisis accelerates. The past 8 years have been the hottest on record, according to the World Meteorological Organization. Glaciers melt, forests burn, insurers quietly abandon flood-prone regions. This has prompted decades of diplomatic summits, but little systemic change. Inequality continues to erode trust in liberal democracies. According to Freedom House, 2024 marks the 18th consecutive year of global democratic decline. Just 20% of the world's population now lives in countries considered fully free. The rule of law is no longer an assumed baseline, but an embattled proposition, even in the world's oldest democracies. And yet the global order limps along. The machinery creaks and cranks on. But now there's a different kind of shock to the system. The blunt, bizarre, scary return of Donald Trump to the global stage. And with him, a more naked attack on the modern architecture of multilateral cooperation than we've yet seen. Perhaps we have Trump to thank for exposing the fragility and hypocrisy of the current international system, for shaking the illusion that it was working just fine. And maybe, if we are wise, for jolting the rest of us into finally getting serious about fixing it. Compared to war or economic collapse or environmental disaster, the arrival of Trump is not an existential catastrophe so far. Global institutions still exist, trade continues, the climate regime, such as it is, stumbles forward. This moment is certainly dangerous, but it's also opportune. And you can feel that in meetings with colleagues in the Global South in a way that possibly is less apparent when colleagues in the Global North gather to survey the wreckage. Political scientist Homer-Dixon argues that complex societies often fail to innovate fast enough to match the pace of emerging crises. But he also suggests that small shocks can serve as vital warning systems, forcing institutions to adapt before total breakdown becomes inevitable. Not existential crises, but crises that expose systemic weaknesses and make reform politically viable. Small enough to manage, large enough to matter. And there are three conditions that seem to be crucial if a littler crisis is to lead to real change. First, visible systemic failure. People need to know, feel that the system is broken. And today, trust in governments, corporations and media is plummeting. The Edelman Trust Barometer shows that 42% of people worldwide believe the system is working for them. And second, elite disunity. Cracks among political, financial and media elites create opportunities for new coalitions to form. I know everyone's quoting Gramsci at the moment. He argued that moments of crisis occur when the ruling class is no longer able to lead in the old way and the ruled are no longer willing to be led. Third, the existence of organised alternatives. Crisis alone does not deliver change. It creates space. That space must be filled with clear proposals, or in a political sense, concrete demands, and institutions must be willing to receive them. Without these, Rupture may produce volatility, but not transformation. Today, each of these conditions is present, albeit unevenly. Even before Trump's return, there were signs of movement. The World Bank began redefining its mandate around global public goods. The African Union joined the G20. The UN began leading international tax discussions. You can think of other examples. Since January 2025, Trump's renewed assault on multilateralism has accelerated conversations once considered fringe. Regional blocs are strengthening ties. Global South coalitions are pushing harder for voice and resources, even UN reform. The new pandemic agreement has just been agreed in Geneva, and this was probably only possible because of an absent USA. New ideas like global public investment are gaining momentum. The threat to the system has paradoxically reminded many why it matters. Next on the list, digital and AI regulation. Trumpism then is a kind of early warning system, not yet collapse, but a flashing red light on the dashboard. The question is whether it will be treated as such. Political inertia is powerful. Even in moments of clear systemic failure, political systems resist reform unless there is both internal legitimacy and intellectual tools to reimagine policy. Seizing this moment demands imagination, therefore, and political courage, not only to push back against demagogues, but to address the deeper economic, political and ecological injustices that have made societies vulnerable to them. It demands investment in public goods, health, education, infrastructure, climate resilience, rather than further retreat into privatisation or philanthropy, F-I-double-L as I say, philanthropy, filling the gaps left by a public retreat with billionaire largesse. Above all, we need to avoid the twin temptations of complacency and despondency. We need to act instead with renewed urgency and agency. This might be the crisis we've been waiting for.